Look around you right now. Go ahead. Take it all in. The walls, the objects, the light filtering through your window, the screen in front of you. You think you're seeing everything, don't you? You believe your eyes are delivering an accurate, complete picture of the world around you. But here's the truth that will unsettle you for the rest of this video. Right now, at this very moment, your brain is hiding most of reality from you. Not because something is wrong with you, not because you're distracted or unfocused, but because it has to. Because if it didn't, you would be completely overwhelmed, paralyzed by the sheer volume of information constantly flooding your senses. What if I told you that objects literally disappear from your perception when you stop paying attention to them? What if I explained that your brain erases things before you ever consciously see them? What if I revealed that two people can stand in the exact same location, looking at the exact same scene, and yet live in completely different realities, experiencing fundamentally different versions of what's really there? Tonight, we're going deep. We're uncovering the brain's hidden filters, the invisible mechanisms that shape every single moment of your conscious experience. And I'm warning you now, once you start noticing these filters, once you become aware of the constant editing, compression, and rewriting happening behind the scenes of your awareness, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the comfortable assumption that your eyes are windows and your brain is just passively receiving the truth. So settle in. Turn off distractions. Because what we're about to explore will fundamentally change how you understand your own perception, your own memories, and the very nature of what you call reality. Your brain is not a camera. Let's start by destroying a comfortable myth. The myth that your eyes work like cameras, capturing reality and projecting it onto the screen of your consciousness. This metaphor is so deeply embedded in how we talk about vision that you probably never questioned it. I see what I see, you think. My eyes show me what's there. But your eyes don't show you anything. They can't. They're just biological sensors, capturing patterns of light and converting them into electrical signals. That raw data means nothing by itself. It's your biological tissue, rods and cones responding to photons, sending electrical impulses down neural pathways. Without interpretation, without processing, without context, these signals are just noise. It's your brain that constructs what you experience as seeing. And here's the critical part. Your brain doesn't simply display that data. It compresses it, interprets it, predicts it, and most importantly, it deletes enormous amounts of it before you ever become aware of anything. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing a story your brain tells you about the world. A story that's based on incoming sensory data, yes, but also based on your expectations, your memories, your current goals, your emotional state, and countless unconscious processes you have no direct access to. Let me give you a simple example that will prove this to you right now. You cannot see your nose. Well, you can if you try, if you deliberately focus on it. But right now, before I mentioned it, you weren't seeing it. Yet it's always there. It occupies a significant portion of your visual field, constantly present in the bottom center of your view. Your brain simply edits it out, deciding that this information isn't useful, that it would be distracting clutter in your visual experience. And it's not just your nose. Your vision has blind spots, literal gaps where your optic nerve connects to your retina and there are no photoreceptors to capture light. You have two of them, one in each eye. Right now, there are portions of the scene in front of you that you literally cannot see, where no visual information exists. But you don't experience holes in your vision. You don't see black spots or empty spaces. Your brain fills them in, seamlessly, so perfectly that you never even suspect they're there. Think about what this means. Your brain is constantly taking incomplete information with gaps and blind spots and irrelevant details, and it's constructing a seamless, coherent experience that feels complete. It feels like you're seeing everything, like the picture is whole. But it's not. It's an edited version, a compressed file, a story told so convincingly that you mistake it for unfiltered truth. And this isn't limited to vision. Your brain does this with all your senses. Right now, you're not hearing the sound of your own breathing unless I draw your attention to it. You're not feeling the pressure of your clothes against your skin unless you think about it. You're not aware of the subtle background noise of electrical devices or air circulation until something makes you notice. Your consciousness is not a passive receiver. It's an active constructor, constantly making decisions about what to include and what to exclude, what matters and what doesn't, what's real enough to warrant your attention, and what can be safely ignored or fabricated. This is the first filter, the compression filter. Your brain takes an overwhelming flood of sensory data and reduces it to a manageable stream of relevant information. And you never see what was removed. You never miss it. You never even know it was there. But let's go deeper into this compression filter, because understanding how it works reveals just how extensively your experience is constructed rather than received. Your retina contains approximately 130 million photoreceptor cells. Each one is constantly firing, sending signals about the light hitting that specific point. That's 130 million data points, updating constantly multiple times per second. But your optic nerve, the pathway that carries this information to your brain, only contains about 1.2 million nerve fibers. Do you see the problem? You have 130 million sensors, but only 1.2 million transmission lines. The data has to be compressed by a factor of more than 100 to 1 before it even leaves your eye. Your retina itself is doing massive pre-processing, deciding what's important enough to send and what can be discarded. And that's just the beginning of the compression. Once the signals reach your visual cortex, there's further filtering, further selection, further reduction. By the time visual information reaches your conscious awareness, it's been compressed, edited, and reconstructed so many times that calling it a direct perception of reality is almost laughable. This compression isn't random. Your brain has priorities, algorithms developed through millions of years of evolution. It prioritizes edges and boundaries because those define objects. It prioritizes movement because movement might be a threat or an opportunity. It prioritizes faces because recognizing other humans quickly is crucial for a social species. It prioritizes novelty because new things in the environment might require a response. Everything else gets compressed more aggressively, represented more schematically, filled in based on expectations rather than actual incoming data. This is why you can look directly at something and not see it if it's not moving, if it doesn't have clear edges, if it blends with the background. Your brain compressed it down to background, nothing important here, and didn't bother showing you the details. This is why camouflage works. Animals that match their environment aren't invisible. Light is still reflecting off them, hitting your retina, generating signals. But your visual system's edge detection and contrast enhancement processes don't identify them as separate objects, so they get compressed into the background. They're there in the raw data, but they don't make it through the compression filter into your conscious experience. And here's something that should really disturb you. You can't tell the difference between details you're actually seeing and details your brain is filling in. The fabricated parts feel just as real, just as vivid, just as clearly perceived as the parts based on actual incoming data. When you look at a wall, you experience it as having uniform texture across its entire surface. But you're only actually seeing fine detail in the tiny area where your central vision is focused. The rest, the entire periphery, is a low-resolution approximation that your brain fills in based on the assumption that the wall is uniform. If there were small irregularities in the peripheral areas, you wouldn't notice them. Your brain would smooth them over, maintaining the illusion of uniform perception across your entire visual field. This is the paradox of compression. It makes your experience feel more complete, more coherent, more reliable. But it does so by removing information, by filling gaps with assumptions, by showing you a simplified, schematic version of reality that's easier to process but less accurate. The filter of attention, the spotlight in the dark. But compression is just the beginning. The second filter is even more powerful, even more selective, the filter of attention. Here's a number that should disturb you. Researchers estimate that your senses take in approximately 11 million pieces of information per second. 11 million. That's the raw data streaming into your brain at every moment. Visual data, auditory data, tactile sensations, smells, proprioceptive feedback about your body's position, internal signals about your organs and systems. 11 million pieces of information per second. And how much of that do you consciously process? How much actually makes it into your awareness? About 40 pieces of information per second. That's it. Think about that ratio. Out of 11 million bits of incoming data, you're consciously aware of 40. That means 99.999996% of reality is filtered out before it ever reaches your conscious mind. You are living in a tiny, narrow spotlight of awareness, moving through an ocean of information that you will never perceive. This is why you can walk past the same building every single day and suddenly notice architectural details that were always there. They didn't appear. You just never allocated attention to them before. Your brain asked its constant question, is this useful for survival or current goals right now? And for months or years, the answer was no. So those details never made it through the filter. This is why people don't see the stop sign they drive past daily until they get a ticket. It was always there. Their eyes captured the light reflecting off it, but their brain categorized it as familiar, irrelevant, not requiring conscious attention. Until suddenly it was relevant, and then it appeared to them as if for the first time. The filter of attention operates on a simple principle. Your brain is trying to keep you alive and help you achieve your current goals. Everything else is noise, and everything else is almost everything. You've probably heard of the famous invisible gorilla experiment. Participants were asked to watch a video of people passing a basketball and count the passes. About half of them completely failed to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the middle of the scene, stopping, beating their chest, and walking off. Not because they had bad vision, not because they weren't paying attention, but because their attention was focused on counting passes, and the brain filtered out everything else, even something as anomalous and obvious as a gorilla. This happens to you constantly. You are missing obvious things all the time. Not occasionally, not when you're distracted, but as the default mode of your perception. Your brain is showing you a curated selection of reality, and you're mistaking it for the whole picture. But here's where it gets even stranger. The filter of attention doesn't just decide what you see. It decides what exists in your conscious reality. Objects that you're not paying attention to don't just fade into the background. In a meaningful sense, they vanish. They're not part of your experienced reality until attention brings them back into existence. Researchers studying this phenomenon have found that when people are focused on a task, you can change significant elements of their environment and they won't notice. You can switch the person they're talking to mid-conversation. You can change the color of walls. You can remove or add furniture. And they'll have no awareness that anything changed because those elements weren't part of their attended reality. There's a phenomenon called change blindness that demonstrates this dramatically. Researchers show people two nearly identical images, alternating back and forth. The images differ in significant ways. A building is present in one and absent in the other. Colors are different. Entire objects have moved. But because the changes happen during a brief flicker, they don't attract attention. And people can stare at these alternating images for minutes without noticing obvious, major differences, because their attention isn't directed to the changing elements. The things you're not attending to aren't just in the background. They're essentially not in your reality at all. Your conscious experience consists only of what you're paying attention to, plus a vague, low-resolution sense that there's more stuff around, but you're not actually experiencing that stuff in any meaningful way. This creates a profound problem. You cannot know what you're not paying attention to. You cannot be aware of what you're filtering out. The gaps in your perception are invisible to you because the very mechanism that would notice them is the mechanism that's creating them. You think you're experiencing a complete, stable, continuous reality. But you're experiencing a flickering, narrow, constantly shifting beam of attention, moving across a dark ocean of information that remains forever hidden from you. Let me give you a concrete example of how limited your attention actually is. Right now, as you're processing these words, can you also maintain full awareness of the pressure of your feet against the floor, the ambient temperature of the room, any smells in your environment, the sounds of traffic or nature outside, the full visual field including your peripheral vision, the position and tension in your shoulders and neck, the rhythm of your breathing. You can't. The moment you try to attend to all of these simultaneously, most of them slip away. You might catch one or two, but the others fade. And here's the thing, all of those sensations are constantly present, constantly generating signals. But they're not in your conscious experience unless you direct attention to them. And even when you do direct attention, you can only hold a few things in awareness at once. The classic research suggests you can maintain conscious awareness of about 4 to 7 distinct items simultaneously. Everything beyond that gets compressed into categories, patterns, chunks. This is why experts in any field seem to perceive more than novices. Not because they have better sensory organs, but because they've learned to chunk information differently. A chess master looking at a board doesn't see individual pieces. They see patterns, configurations, threats, and opportunities. They've compressed the 32 pieces into maybe 5 or 6 meaningful chunks, which fits within attention's capacity. A novice tries to track each piece individually and gets overwhelmed. Your attention is constantly making these trade-offs. What to track in detail, what to compress into patterns, what to ignore entirely. And you have very limited control over this process. You can direct your attention voluntarily to some extent, but most of the filtering happens automatically, driven by evolutionary priorities you can't override. Threats attract attention automatically. Sudden movements attract attention. Your name attracts attention. Sexual stimuli attract attention. Novel things attract attention temporarily. But subtle, static, familiar elements, they're filtered out, even if they're important, even if you consciously want to notice them. This is why it's so hard to notice your own habits, your own patterns of behavior. They're familiar, they're not novel, they don't trigger automatic attention capture. So they operate below the level of conscious awareness, and you keep repeating them without ever really noticing you're doing them. This is why it's so hard to notice gradual changes. Weight gain, aging, the slow deterioration of a relationship, the incremental drift of your values. Each day-to-day change is too small to capture attention. Your brain categorizes today as basically the same as yesterday and doesn't bother showing you the subtle differences. Years pass, and you suddenly notice you're in a completely different situation, and you wonder how you didn't see it happening. But you didn't see it, because it was happening too slowly to trigger the novelty filter. Your attention is not designed to give you accurate, complete perception. It's designed to keep you alive and functional, and those goals often conflict with the goal of seeing what's actually there. Prediction filters. Your brain shows you the future, not the present. Now we come to perhaps the most disturbing filter of all. Your brain doesn't just compress and select reality. It predicts it. And then it shows you the prediction instead of waiting for the actual sensory data to arrive and be processed. Here's why this is necessary. There's a delay, a lag time, between when something happens in the world and when you become consciously aware of it. Light has to travel from objects to your eyes. Electrical signals have to travel from your sensory organs to your brain. Your brain has to process and interpret those signals. All of this takes time. Not much time, maybe a few hundred milliseconds, but in a world where threats can emerge in an instant, that delay could be fatal. So your brain developed a solution, prediction. It doesn't wait for reality to arrive. It guesses what's about to happen based on past experience, based on patterns, based on context. It generates a prediction of what you're about to see, hear, and feel. And then when the actual sensory data arrives, it does a quick check. Was I close enough? If the prediction was reasonably accurate, your brain shows you the prediction, not the reality. It's faster, it's smoother, it feels more immediate. You experience what your brain expected to happen, not what actually happened, as long as the difference is small enough. This is why you see what you expect to see. It's not a metaphor. It's literally true. Your brain generates expectations based on your beliefs, your past experiences, your current context, and it shows you those expectations. Reality only breaks through when it's sufficiently different from the prediction to trigger an error signal. Think about reading. You don't actually process every letter of every word. Your brain predicts what words are coming based on context, and you see those predicted words. This is why you often don't notice typos when you're reading quickly. Your brain predicted the correct word, showed you that prediction, and the actual error in the text wasn't significant enough to trigger a correction. Researchers have done experiments where they gradually morph one face into another while someone is looking at it. If the morphing is slow enough, people often don't notice the change at all. They keep seeing the original face because that's what their brain is predicting. Their prediction gets updated gradually, smoothly, and they never experience a moment of change. The face they're seeing is the predicted face, not the actual face on the screen. This is why witnesses to the same event give completely different accounts. They weren't lying. They weren't even necessarily mistaken about what they experienced. But what they experienced was heavily influenced by what they expected to see, what they were primed to notice, what made sense given their beliefs and understanding. Their brains were showing them predictions based on different models, different expectations, different contexts. This is why memories feel absolutely real and yet can be completely inaccurate. You're not remembering reality. You're remembering your brain's interpreted, predicted, reconstructed version of reality. And each time you recall a memory, you're not pulling up a stored video file. You're reconstructing it again, predicting what must have happened based on fragments of information, and your current beliefs and knowledge influence that reconstruction. Your brain is essentially running a simulation of reality, constantly predicting what's about to happen and showing you that simulation. The actual sensory data serves mainly as error correction, updating the simulation when the predictions are wrong enough to matter. This means you are always living slightly in the past, experiencing a predicted version of a reality that already happened, but you're also living slightly in the future, because what you're seeing is based on what your brain thinks is about to happen. You are not experiencing the present moment. You are experiencing a predicted model of the recent past, continuously updated and adjusted, but never quite aligned with the actual flow of events. You live in a simulation generated by your own brain, and you call it reality. Let's explore this prediction mechanism more deeply, because it's operating at every level of your perception, in ways you've never suspected. When you reach out to pick up an object, your brain predicts what it will feel like, how heavy it will be, what texture it will have. These predictions are based on visual cues, past experiences with similar objects, context. And when you actually touch it, what you experience is primarily the prediction, updated only if there's a significant error. This is why it feels so strange when an object is much lighter or heavier than it looks. That jarring sensation isn't just surprise. It's the feeling of your prediction being wrong, of reality breaking through the expected simulation. Most of the time, predictions are close enough that you never notice you're experiencing them instead of direct sensation. When you hear someone speaking, your brain predicts what they're going to say based on the conversation context, their typical patterns of speech, common phrases, grammar. This is why you can understand speech even in noisy environments where you're not actually hearing all the sounds clearly. Your brain fills in the gaps with predictions. This is why you sometimes hear something that wasn't actually said. The person's mouth movements, the context, your expectations combine to generate a prediction that was stronger than the actual auditory signal. When you move your own body, your brain predicts the sensory consequences of that movement before you even complete it. This is why you can't tickle yourself. When you try, your brain predicts exactly what sensations your touch will create, and it filters them out as irrelevant. But when someone else touches you, there's no prediction, so the sensations feel much stronger. It's the same physical stimulus, but completely different conscious experiences because of prediction. This prediction system is so pervasive that researchers now think it's the fundamental organizing principle of brain function. Your brain is not primarily reactive, responding to incoming stimuli. It's primarily predictive, constantly generating models of what should happen next, and using incoming data mainly to correct errors in those models. Think about what this means for learning. When you're learning something new, your brain hasn't built accurate prediction models yet. Everything requires conscious attention, everything feels effortful, everything is unpredictable. But as you practice, your brain builds better predictive models. It starts anticipating what comes next, and eventually, the entire skill becomes automatic, predicted so accurately that you can perform it without conscious thought. This is why it's so hard to remember the process of learning something after you've mastered it. You're trying to remember what it felt like when your brain couldn't predict the task, but your current brain can predict it perfectly, and it's nearly impossible to turn that prediction off and experience the task the way a beginner would. This is why experts often struggle to teach beginners. The expert's brain predicts every step automatically. They can't easily access the conscious, unpredicted, step-by-step experience that the beginner is having. They've forgotten what it's like to not know what comes next. Your entire sense of time is shaped by prediction. When you're in a familiar routine, doing things your brain can predict well, time seems to pass quickly. There's little prediction error, little novelty, little that requires conscious processing. Your brain is just running its simulation, confirming that reality matches expectations, and not bothering to create detailed conscious experiences of each moment. But in novel situations, when your brain can't predict well, time seems to slow down. Every moment requires conscious attention because the predictions keep being wrong. Your brain has to actually process the incoming data rather than just confirming its guesses. This creates more detailed memories, more conscious experiences, and a subjective sense that more time passed. This is why childhood seems longer than adulthood. Children are constantly encountering novel situations their brains can't predict. Every experience requires conscious processing. But as adults, we fall into routines, and our brains predict most of our experience, creating fewer distinct conscious moments. And here's something truly disturbing. Your predictions shape not just what you perceive, but what you're capable of perceiving. If your brain has no model for something, no prediction framework that could accommodate it, you might be completely unable to consciously register it even if it's right in front of you. There are documented cases of people from isolated cultures encountering photographs for the first time and being unable to see them as representations of reality. The images were just patterns to them. Their brains had no prediction model for flat surface that represents three-dimensional scene, so they couldn't perceive it that way. This happens to you too, in subtler ways. There are patterns in reality that you're not perceiving because your brain has no framework to predict them. Someone with expertise in a field sees patterns you can't see, not because they have better eyes, but because their brain has prediction models that yours lacks. The artist sees color relationships you don't perceive. The musician hears harmonic structures you don't notice. The mathematician sees patterns in numbers you experience as random, not because the information isn't there, but because their brains predict it and yours doesn't. Your predictions determine your reality, and your predictions are based on your past experiences, your beliefs, your cultural context, your language, your expectations. Two people with different backgrounds, different beliefs, different prediction models will literally see different realities when looking at the same scene. This isn't relativism. There is an objective reality generating the sensory data, but your conscious experience of that reality is mediated by prediction, and predictions vary from person to person. The emotional filter, how feelings reshape perception. There's another filter we need to examine, one that's less discussed but equally powerful, the emotional filter. Your current emotional state fundamentally changes how your brain filters and interprets reality. When you're anxious, your threat detection systems become more sensitive. Your brain lowers the threshold for what counts as potentially dangerous. Ambiguous stimuli get interpreted as threats. Neutral faces look hostile. Uncertain situations feel risky. This isn't paranoia. It's your brain adjusting its prediction models based on your emotional state, preparing you to detect and respond to threats more quickly. But here's the cost. This increased sensitivity to potential threats comes with increased false positives. You see dangers that aren't there. You interpret benign events as threatening. Your reality becomes more dangerous not because the world changed, but because your filtering changed. When you're depressed, your brain filters out positive information. This is well documented. People experiencing depression have trouble noticing, remembering, or giving weight to positive events. Not because those events aren't happening, but because their emotional state changes how information is filtered. The brain prioritizes information consistent with the depressed state, creating a feedback loop where your filtered perception reinforces the emotional state that's creating the filtering. When you're in love, your brain literally filters reality to make the other person seem more attractive, more wonderful, more special than they objectively are. Brain imaging studies show reduced activity in areas involved in critical judgment when people look at romantic partners. The filtering is working to maintain the emotional state, showing you a reality that supports your feelings rather than challenging them. When you're angry, your attention narrows dramatically. Your brain filters out contextual information, mitigating factors, alternative interpretations. You see only what confirms your anger, what justifies it. This is adaptive in the short term. It helps you commit to confrontation without being paralyzed by doubt, but it means your reality when angry is fundamentally different from your reality when calm. Your emotions are not just reactions to perceived reality. They're actively shaping what reality you perceive. This creates feedback loops that can be very difficult to break. Your emotional state causes you to filter reality in ways that reinforce that emotional state, which strengthens the filtering, which intensifies the emotion. Think about how different the same environment feels when you're in different moods. Your home feels different when you're happy versus when you're sad. Not because it objectively changed, but because your emotional state changed what you notice, what you pay attention to, what meanings you assign to neutral objects and situations. The chair that felt comfortable yesterday feels oppressive today. The music that seemed energizing this morning seems grating this afternoon. The person whose habits were endearing last week are now annoying. What changed? Not the chair, not the music, not the person's habits. Your emotional filter changed, and with it, your entire experience of reality. This has profound implications for understanding yourself and others. When someone describes a situation completely differently than you experienced it, they might not be wrong or dishonest. They might have been in a different emotional state, which created genuinely different filtering, genuinely different conscious experience. This is why it's so hard to resolve arguments when emotions are high. Both people are experiencing different realities, filtered through different emotional states. They're not disagreeing about interpretation. They literally perceived different things, noticed different details, assigned different meanings. And both experiences felt completely real and obvious. This is why therapeutic approaches that try to change emotional states can be so effective. When the emotional state changes, the filtering changes, and suddenly the person can perceive aspects of reality they were previously unable to see. It's not that they were choosing not to see positive things while depressed. It's that their depression was literally filtering those things out of their conscious experience. And this is why practices like gratitude journals or cognitive reframing can work. They're not denying reality or forcing positive thinking. They're training your brain to adjust its filters, to notice information that your current emotional state might be filtering out. Your emotional filter is not under your complete control. Emotions arise partially from automatic processes, from body states, from unconscious evaluations. But you have some influence. You can recognize when your emotional state might be distorting your perception. You can deliberately look for information that your current filter might be excluding. You can consider that your current reality might be emotionally filtered rather than objectively true. The memory filter. Why your past keeps changing. Now let's examine one of the most disturbing aspects of filtering, what it does to your memories. You think of memory as recording, as accessing stored information about past events. But that's not how it works. Memory is reconstruction, and every reconstruction is filtered by your current state, your current beliefs, your current needs. Every time you remember something, you're not pulling up a file. You're rebuilding the memory from fragments, filling in gaps with predictions about what must have happened, influenced by everything you've learned since the original event. And then, crucially, you store this reconstruction, not the original. Next time you remember that event, you're remembering the reconstruction, not the original experience. This means your memories are constantly changing. Subtly, gradually, but continuously, details shift. Emotions intensify or fade. Meanings change. Your past is not fixed. It's actively being rewritten based on your present. Think about a memory you've recalled many times, maybe an important childhood memory or a significant life event. How much of what you remember is the actual original experience, and how much has been added, edited, or reinterpreted through years of reconstruction? The emotional tone has probably shifted. Events that didn't seem important at the time have taken on significance based on what happened later. Details that were probably vague have become specific, filled in by your brain's prediction systems. The narrative has become cleaner, more coherent, more story-like than the messy, ambiguous reality probably was. Research on memory is deeply unsettling. People can be made to remember events that never happened, with complete confidence and vivid detail. Not through some sophisticated manipulation, but through simple suggestion, through asking them to imagine scenarios, through showing them doctored photographs. Their brains construct memories of these false events that feel identical to real memories. Eyewitness testimony, once considered the gold standard of evidence, is now known to be remarkably unreliable. Witnesses are confident, they're sincere, they truly believe they're accurately reporting what they saw. But studies show they're wrong terrifyingly often, influenced by leading questions, by stress, by their own expectations and beliefs. Your brain's filtering processes don't stop when an event ends. They continue operating on your memory of that event, continuously reshaping it. Your current emotional state colors your memories. Your current beliefs influence what details seem important. Your current understanding fills in gaps with plausible, but potentially inaccurate information. This is why siblings can remember the same childhood event completely differently. They're not necessarily lying or misremembering more than each other. They've been reconstructing that memory from their own perspectives, filtered through their own subsequent experiences, beliefs, and emotional associations. After years of separate reconstruction, their memories of the same event might share very little. This is why trauma memories are often so fragmented and inconsistent. During traumatic events, normal memory encoding processes are disrupted. The experience isn't being stored coherently. And then, when the person tries to remember, their brain attempts to reconstruct a coherent narrative from fragments, predictions, and emotion. The result feels real, but it might not accurately represent what happened. This is also why positive memories tend to become more positive over time, and negative memories often become more negative. Your brain's emotional filtering affects not just current perception, but also memory reconstruction. Happy periods are remembered as happier than they were. Difficult periods are remembered as more difficult. The complexity, the ambiguity, the mixed feelings of actual experience get compressed into simpler, more emotionally pure memories. There's a phenomenon called the reminiscence bump, where people remember disproportionately more events from adolescence and early adulthood. Not because more important things happened then, but because those were years of novelty, of firsts, of experiences that couldn't be well predicted. Those memories required more conscious processing at the time and created more distinct, detailed memory traces. Your brain's prediction filters were working less effectively, so more got through to become memorable. Think about what this means for your sense of self, for your life narrative. The story you tell about who you are, how you got here, what shaped you, it's based on memories that have been continuously reconstructed, continuously filtered through your current perspective. Your past is not a fixed foundation. It's a fluid narrative, constantly being rewritten. This doesn't mean your memories are worthless or that nothing can be known about the past. Core events, major facts, the general shape of your history, these are probably reasonably accurate. But the details, the emotions, the meanings, the lessons you think you learned, these are actively constructed by your current self, not passively retrieved from your past. And here's the really disturbing part. You can't tell the difference. False memories don't feel false. Reconstructed details don't feel reconstructed. Your brain presents everything with the same quality of seeming real, and you have no internal mechanism to distinguish accurate memories from filtered, reconstructed, or entirely fabricated ones. The confidence you feel in a memory has almost no correlation with its accuracy. Some of your most vivid, most certain memories are likely substantially inaccurate. And some accurate memories might feel uncertain because they conflict with your current beliefs or expectations. Your memory is not a record of your past. It's a story your current brain tells about the past, filtered through all the same mechanisms that filter your current perception, serving your current needs, and consistent with your current beliefs. When filters change, glitches in the matrix. So what happens when these filters weaken? When the compression relaxes, when attention broadens, when prediction becomes less certain? What happens when you start seeing more of the raw data, more of the unedited reality your brain usually hides? People describe it as disturbing, unsettling, wrong. During periods of extreme fatigue, your prediction filters can weaken. Your brain doesn't have the resources to maintain its usual confident simulation. And suddenly, familiar places look strange. Objects seem off in ways you can't quite articulate. The world feels flat, or conversely, hyperreal, too detailed, too present. You're seeing more of the actual sensory data and less of the predicted model, and it feels wrong because you're not used to it. The smooth, coherent simulation you normally experience has glitches, gaps, inconsistencies. This is what people often describe as feeling out of it or not quite there. They're not being metaphorical. Their brain's reality construction processes are not functioning at full capacity, and the result is a degraded simulation, one where the filtering and prediction are inconsistent, creating a sense of unreality or strangeness. During intense stress or anxiety, your attention filter can broaden, and suddenly you're noticing everything. The hum of fluorescent lights becomes overwhelming. You can feel every thread of your clothing against your skin. Visual details you normally filter out demand attention. It's exhausting because your brain is designed to narrow attention, not broaden it, and when that filter fails, you're flooded with information you're not equipped to process. This is a common description of panic attacks. Reality feels too intense, too much, too detailed. Not because reality changed, but because the normal filtering that makes reality manageable has broken down. You're experiencing something closer to the raw sensory flood, and it's overwhelming. During deep focus, during flow states, the opposite can happen. Your attention becomes so narrow, so intensely focused, that everything else disappears completely. People report losing awareness of their bodies, of time, of their surroundings. They're not being metaphorical. Those things literally leave their conscious experience because the attention filter has become so selective that only the task remains. Athletes describe this as the zone. Artists describe it as losing themselves in their work. It feels transcendent because it's so different from normal experience, where attention is constantly shifting, where you're aware of multiple things simultaneously. But in flow, the filter narrows to a single point and everything else vanishes. And then there's dissociation, a state where the filters seem to malfunction in a different way. People describe feeling like they're watching reality from outside themselves, like they're observing their own lives through glass, like everything is distant and unreal. This might be what happens when the integration between different filtering processes breaks down, when the brain's constructed simulation of reality becomes disconnected from the sense of being the agent experiencing it. Depersonalization is a form of this where your sense of self feels unreal or distant. Derealization is the form where the external world feels unreal. Both are potentially related to disruptions in how the brain normally integrates predicted sensory information with emotional states and the sense of embodied agency. These aren't hallucinations. These aren't breaks from reality. They're changes in how your brain is filtering and presenting reality. The information coming in hasn't changed, but the editing process has, and that changes everything about your conscious experience. Some people experience these filter changes more frequently than others. For some, it's a symptom of neurological differences, of brains that process information differently. For others, it's triggered by specific circumstances: sleep deprivation, sensory overload, intense meditation, certain substances that alter brain chemistry and change how the filtering processes operate. Meditation is particularly interesting in this regard. Advanced meditators report experiences where the normal boundaries of perception seem to dissolve, where the distinction between self and environment becomes unclear, where time seems to stop or expand. These descriptions make sense if meditation is weakening some of the normal filtering processes, particularly the prediction filters and the filters that create your sense of separate selfhood. When you stop predicting, when you let go of expectations about what should happen next, when you quiet the constant mental narration, you might experience reality more directly. Not completely unfiltered, that's probably impossible for a functioning human brain, but with looser, weaker filtering than usual. And people consistently describe this as profound, as revealing, as showing them something important about the nature of reality and consciousness. Perhaps because it reveals that their normal experience is heavily constructed, heavily filtered, and there are other ways of experiencing the same reality that feel radically different. Psychedelic substances are another context where filtering changes dramatically. Users report seeing patterns that aren't normally visible, experiencing synesthesia where senses blend together, feeling dissolution of normal boundaries and categories. These substances seem to disrupt normal filtering processes, particularly the prediction mechanisms and the categorization systems that normally impose order on sensory chaos. What's revealed is not true reality, in some absolute sense, but it's a different filtering, one that makes visible patterns and relationships that normal filtering obscures. This can be valuable, showing you that your default reality is constructed, not given. But it can also be overwhelming or confusing because our brains evolved to filter the way they normally do for good reasons. When people describe feeling like reality is glitching, like the Matrix is breaking down, they might be experiencing moments when their brain's filters become visible to them, when the constructed nature of their experience becomes briefly apparent. The simulation stutters, and for a moment, you notice that it is a simulation. Most of the time, the filters work so seamlessly that you never question them. But when they change, even slightly, the constructed nature of your entire experience becomes suddenly, viscerally obvious. There's a phenomenon called jamais vu, the opposite of déjà vu, where something familiar suddenly feels completely strange and unfamiliar. You look at a common word and it seems bizarre. You're in your own home, but it feels alien. This might be what happens when your prediction filters temporarily fail for that specific context. Your brain can't generate the normal prediction of familiarity, so you experience the raw, unpredicted sensation, which feels wrong precisely because it's not what you're used to. And there's déjà vu itself, where something new feels eerily familiar. This might be a false positive from the prediction system, where your brain generates a strong prediction of familiarity even though you've never encountered this situation before. The feeling of having lived this moment before might be the feeling of your brain confidently predicting it, even though that confidence is misplaced. These glitches, these moments when filtering changes or fails, they're windows into the normally invisible processes that construct your reality. Most people dismiss them, feel uncomfortable with them, try to get back to normal as quickly as possible. But they're revealing something important, that your normal experience, the one that feels so solid and real and unquestionable, is a construction maintained by processes you're not usually aware of. Why some people notice more. Not all brains filter the same way. This is crucial to understand. The strength and selectivity of these filters varies from person to person, and those differences create fundamentally different experiences of reality. Some people have what researchers describe as leaky sensory filters. They don't compress as much. They don't filter out as much irrelevant information. They notice patterns that others miss, details that others never see, connections that others don't make. This isn't better or worse, it's just different processing. For these individuals, reality can feel overwhelming. There's too much information, too many details, too many stimuli competing for attention. What others experience as a calm, ordered environment, they experience as chaos, as sensory overload. The room isn't quiet to them, it's full of sounds others have filtered out. The electrical hum, the air conditioning, the subtle creaks of the building, distant conversations. This is common in people on the autism spectrum. Many describe experiencing sensory information more intensely, noticing details others miss, struggling to filter out irrelevant stimuli. It's not that their senses are more sensitive. It's that their brains filter less aggressively. More of the raw sensory data makes it through to conscious awareness. This can be a superpower in the right contexts. They notice things others miss. They pick up on subtle patterns. They can focus intensely on details. But it's exhausting in typical environments designed for people with stronger filters. Artists often describe this kind of perception. They see colors others don't notice. They pick up on subtle variations in light, in shadow, in form. Not because they have better eyes, but because their brains compress less aggressively, filter less completely. More of the raw visual data makes it through to consciousness. Georgia O'Keeffe described seeing colors that others couldn't see, experiencing visual richness that seemed invisible to others. Was she hallucinating? Probably not. More likely, her visual system filtered less aggressively, allowing her to consciously perceive variations that other brains compressed away as irrelevant. Highly creative individuals often report this kind of looser filtering across multiple domains. They notice patterns in ideas, connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, possibilities that others dismiss or never consider. Their prediction filters might be less rigid, allowing for more unexpected interpretations, more novel combinations. This is what divergent thinking is: the ability to see multiple possibilities, multiple interpretations, multiple patterns in the same information. It's partially about having looser filters that allow more information through and make fewer automatic predictions about what things mean or how they should be categorized. But this comes with costs. These individuals often struggle with focus, with filtering out distractions, with narrowing attention to a single task. They're more prone to sensory overwhelm, to feeling exhausted by environments that others find comfortable. They might seem scattered, unfocused, unable to ignore irrelevant details. On the other end of the spectrum, some people have very strong, very selective filters. They excel at focus, at blocking out distractions, at maintaining attention on a single task for extended periods. Their experience of reality is more stable, more predictable, less chaotic. They're less likely to be overwhelmed by sensory information, less likely to notice subtle details they're not specifically looking for. These individuals thrive in structured environments with clear goals and minimal distraction. They can work productively in conditions that would overwhelm people with looser filters, but they might miss opportunities that require noticing unexpected patterns or making novel connections. Their strong prediction filters make their experience more consistent, but potentially less adaptable. Neither extreme is better. They're adaptive in different contexts. Strong filters help you complete tasks in chaotic environments, help you maintain focus and consistency. Weaker filters help you notice opportunities, make creative connections, adapt to changing circumstances. But here's what's fascinating. The strength of your filters isn't completely fixed. It changes based on your current state, your goals, your environment. Meditation can weaken certain filters temporarily, allowing more sensory information through. Stress can tighten them, narrowing your focus to immediate threats. Practice can change them over time, training your brain to notice things it previously filtered out. Musicians train their brains to filter auditory information differently. After years of practice, they can consciously track individual instruments in complex music, notice subtle variations in pitch and timing that untrained listeners filter into generally in tune or generally on beat. They've learned to weaken their auditory compression filters in specific ways. Radiologists train their brains to notice patterns in X-rays and scans that are invisible to others. They're looking at the same images, but their visual systems have learned to filter differently, to highlight certain patterns as relevant that others' brains categorize as noise. This means your experience of reality is more flexible than you think. You can, to some extent, change how your brain filters information. You can train yourself to notice things you currently miss. You can also train yourself to filter more effectively, to maintain focus despite distractions. But you can't remove the filters entirely. You can't experience raw, unfiltered reality. Your brain will always be selecting, compressing, predicting, constructing. The question is just how much, and in what ways, and whether you're aware it's happening. And here's something important. People with different filtering often fundamentally misunderstand each other. Someone with strong filters might think someone with weak filters is unfocused, distracted, or making things up. Someone with weak filters might think someone with strong filters is oblivious, missing obvious things, or deliberately ignoring important information. But both are just reporting their actual experiences. They're perceiving different realities because they're filtering differently. Understanding this can create compassion, can reduce judgment, can help you recognize that when someone describes experiencing something you don't, they might not be wrong or lying. They might just be filtering differently. Hash the cultural filter, how language shapes reality. There's another layer of filtering we need to examine. The cultural and linguistic filters that shape what you can perceive and think. Your language doesn't just describe your reality. It shapes what reality you can construct. This is a controversial claim, but the evidence is compelling. Languages divide reality differently, create different categories, emphasize different distinctions. And these linguistic structures influence how speakers of those languages filter and perceive. Some languages have many words for different types of snow. Speakers of those languages don't just have more vocabulary. They actually perceive finer distinctions. Notice differences that speakers of languages with one word for snow tend to filter as all basically the same. Some languages don't have color words that map onto the categories English uses. And speakers of those languages literally perceive color boundaries differently. What looks like a clear shift from blue to green to an English speaker might be perceived as variations within one category by a speaker of a language that doesn't make that distinction. Russian has separate words for light blue and dark blue, treating them as fundamentally different colors the way English treats blue and green as different. And Russian speakers are faster at distinguishing these shades, notice the differences more readily. Not because their eyes are different, but because their language filters the information differently, makes that distinction meaningful. Some languages don't use absolute directional terms like left and right. Instead, they always use cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. Speakers of these languages maintain constant awareness of their orientation in a way English speakers typically don't. They've filtered spatial information differently because their language requires it. Your language gives you categories for filtering experience. Things that don't fit cleanly into your language's categories are harder to think about, harder to remember, more likely to be filtered out or distorted to fit. English treats time as a linear path from past through present to future. This feels natural, obvious, like it's just describing reality. But other languages structure time differently. Some emphasize cyclical patterns. Some don't grammatically distinguish past and future the way English does. And speakers of these languages think about and remember temporal relationships differently. This goes beyond language to broader cultural filters. Your culture teaches you what's important to notice, what's relevant, what counts as a meaningful category or distinction. These cultural patterns shape your prediction models, influence what you expect to see, change what makes it through your filters. Western cultures tend to emphasize individual objects, separate things, analytical distinctions. Eastern cultures tend to emphasize relationships, contexts, holistic patterns. And this shows up in perception. When shown the same scene, Westerners tend to focus on central objects. Easterners tend to encode more contextual information about backgrounds and relationships. Neither is seeing more accurately. They're just filtering differently, based on cultural models of what matters. Your culture also shapes your emotional filters. Some cultures encourage noticing and expressing certain emotions while minimizing others. Some make fine distinctions between emotional states that others lump together. And members of those cultures actually experience their emotions differently, filtered through these cultural categories. This means your reality is not just filtered by your individual brain. It's filtered by the linguistic and cultural tools you've internalized, the categories you've learned, the distinctions your language and culture treat as meaningful. This is deeply unsettling. It means people from different cultures aren't just interpreting the same reality differently. They're perceiving different realities, filtered through different linguistic and cultural structures. Communication across these gaps is harder than just translating words. It requires recognizing that the other person's filters might be organizing reality in fundamentally different ways. And you can't escape your cultural filters any more than you can escape your brain's built-in filters. They're part of how you think, how you perceive, how you make sense of sensory information. You can become aware of them, you can learn other cultural frameworks, but you can't perceive without filtering through some cultural structures. This explains why certain concepts are lost in translation. Not because there's no equivalent word, but because the concept depends on a way of filtering and categorizing reality that the other language and culture doesn't use. You can explain the concept, but speakers of the other language will have to consciously construct an understanding, rather than directly perceiving it the way native speakers do. Your reality is multiply-filtered. By your brain's built-in mechanisms, by your individual history and traits, by your current emotional state, by your language, by your culture. Each layer shapes what makes it through, what gets compressed, what gets predicted, what becomes your conscious experience. The IMPLICTONS, living in FILTERED reality. Let's step back and look at what all of this means for how you understand your life, your experiences, your interactions with other people. First, it means that disagreements about what really happened are often not about lying or bad memory. They're about genuinely different filtered versions of the same events. Your brain filtered and predicted one thing. Someone else's brain filtered and predicted something different. You both experienced what felt like complete, accurate reality. But you were each experiencing your brain's constructed simulation, and those simulations weren't the same. This has profound implications for everything from eyewitness testimony to personal relationships. When you're arguing with someone about what was said in a conversation, you're not arguing about objective reality. You're arguing about two different brain-generated reconstructions of that conversation, both of which feel absolutely real and accurate to the person who experienced them. Neither of you is necessarily wrong. You're both accurately reporting what your filtered, predicted, reconstructed experience was. But those experiences weren't the same because the filtering wasn't the same. Second, it means your memories are not reliable records. They feel reliable. They feel real. But they're reconstructed every time you access them, influenced by your current beliefs, your current context, your current emotional state. Details that seem vivid and certain might be predictions your brain filled in later. Events you're sure happened might be combinations of different memories. The confidence you feel in a memory has almost no correlation with its accuracy. This should make you more humble about your own certainty. When you're absolutely sure you remember something happening a certain way, recognize that you're sure about your brain's reconstruction, not necessarily about what actually occurred. Third, it means you are constantly missing things, important things, obvious things, not because you're not paying attention, but because attention is inherently selective and you cannot attend to everything. This should make you more humble about your own perceptions, more willing to consider that you might have missed something crucial, more open to the possibility that your version of events is incomplete. When someone points out something you didn't notice, your first instinct might be to defend yourself. I was paying attention, I would have seen that. But you probably wouldn't have. Your brain might have filtered it out as irrelevant, compressed it away, predicted something else. You weren't experiencing complete reality. You were experiencing a filtered selection. Fourth, it means that reality is, to a significant extent, negotiated. Not in some postmodern sense where truth doesn't exist, but in the concrete sense that what enters your conscious experience is shaped by your expectations, your beliefs, your goals, your past experiences, your language, your culture. Two people in the same situation with different filters will literally perceive different realities. This is why changing someone's mind is so difficult. You're not just asking them to consider new evidence. You're asking them to change the filters that determine what counts as evidence, what seems relevant, what fits into their model of reality. Their brain has been predicting one kind of reality, showing them one kind of simulation, and you're asking them to rebuild that entire construction. Information that contradicts their predictions will be filtered more aggressively, treated as anomalous, maybe not even making it through to conscious awareness. Information that confirms their predictions will be highlighted, will feel more significant, will be more easily remembered. This is confirmation bias, but it's not a conscious choice. It's how the filtering mechanisms work. Fifth, it means you should be skeptical of your own certainty. When you feel absolutely sure you saw something, heard something, remember something, ask yourself, am I experiencing reality or am I experiencing my brain's prediction? Am I seeing what's there or what I expect to be there? Am I remembering what happened or what makes sense to me now? This isn't paranoia. It's accuracy. It's recognizing how your perception actually works. The things you're most certain about might be the things where your predictions are strongest, where your filters are working most aggressively to show you what you expect rather than what's actually there. Sixth, it means you have more agency than you think. If your filters can change, if they vary based on state and practice and attention, then you can influence what you perceive. You can train yourself to notice things you currently miss. You can choose where to direct your limited attention. You can question your own predictions and look for disconfirming evidence. You can't remove the filters, but you can become more aware of them, more intentional about them. This is what mindfulness is. Becoming aware of your own filtering processes, noticing when you're predicting rather than perceiving, catching yourself in automatic patterns of attention and interpretation. It doesn't give you unfiltered reality, but it gives you more flexibility in how you filter. And finally, it means you should have more compassion for others whose realities seem strange or wrong to you. They might not be irrational or dishonest. They might be filtering differently, based on different predictions, different cultural frameworks, different emotional states, different attentional priorities. Their reality feels just as real and obvious to them as yours does to you. Understanding that everyone lives in a filtered, constructed, predicted simulation should make you less judgmental, more curious, more willing to consider that the other person's experience might be valid even if it's different from yours. Hash what your brain is hiding right now. So let's come back to where we started. Right now, at this moment, as you're reading or listening to these words, your brain is hiding most of reality from you. It's hiding the feeling of your clothes against your skin. It's hiding the subtle background sounds of your environment. It's hiding the blind spots in your vision, the constant small movements of your eyes, the fact that you can only see color in the center of your visual field, and everything in your peripheral vision is essentially black and white. It's hiding the constant stream of predictions it's making about what's about to happen, the tiny adjustments it's making when those predictions are wrong, the vast majority of sensory information it's compressing and discarding. It's hiding all the things you're not paying attention to, which is almost everything. It's hiding all the details it's filling in based on expectations rather than actual perception. It's hiding the constructed, simulated nature of everything you're experiencing. And it's doing all of this so seamlessly, so perfectly, that you experience it as direct, unfiltered access to reality. You feel like you're seeing what's there. You feel like you're experiencing the present moment as it actually is. But you're not. You're experiencing a story your brain is telling you, a simulation it's running, a filtered, compressed, predicted version of reality constructed from incomplete information and shaped by your expectations, your goals, your past experiences, your emotions, your language, your culture. This isn't a flaw. It's how your brain keeps you functional in a world that contains far more information than you could possibly process. It's how you're able to make sense of chaos, find patterns in noise, function effectively despite the overwhelming complexity of your environment. But it does mean that reality isn't what you see. Reality is what your brain allows you to see, what it decides to show you, what makes it through the multiple layers of filtering between raw sensory data and conscious experience. And once you understand this, once you really internalize how extensively your experience is constructed rather than directly perceived, It changes things. It should make you more curious about what you're missing, more humble about what you're certain of, more open to the possibility that your version of reality is just one of many possible versions, all constructed from the same underlying information, but filtered and assembled in different ways. Right now, in this moment, there are sounds you're not hearing, sights you're not seeing, sensations you're not feeling, patterns you're not noticing. Not because they're not there, but because your brain has decided they're not relevant, has compressed them away, has filtered them out of your conscious experience. There are predictions you're not aware of, expectations shaping what you perceive, emotional filters coloring your reality, cultural categories determining what seems meaningful or noticeable. You are living in a narrow spotlight of awareness, a constructed simulation, a story your brain tells about reality, and you're mistaking it for the whole truth. Hash the moment of awareness. There's a strange thing that happens when you become aware of these filters. For a moment, they become visible. You notice the constructed nature of your experience. You catch your brain in the act of predicting, filtering, filling in gaps. It's unsettling. It feels like reality is less solid, less reliable than you thought. And that's because it is. The stable, coherent, continuous experience you take for granted is a remarkable achievement of neural processing, not a simple reflection of what's actually there. But this awareness also offers something valuable. The recognition that if your filters can change, if different people filter differently, if your brain is constantly constructing your reality, then you have more flexibility than you realized. You're not trapped in one fixed way of experiencing the world. You can question your own perceptions. You can look for what you might be missing. You can consider that when someone else describes a completely different experience of the same situation, they might not be wrong. They might just be reporting what their differently filtered brain showed them. This awareness can make you more curious, more investigative, less certain, more open. It can help you understand why communication is so difficult, why people can disagree so profoundly about basic facts, why your memories conflict with others' memories of the same events. The filters are always there. You can't remove them. You can't experience unfiltered reality. Your brain will always be selecting, compressing, predicting, constructing. But you can be aware that it's happening, and that awareness changes everything. It changes how you listen to others. Instead of assuming they're wrong when they describe a different reality, you can be curious about how they're filtering, what they're noticing that you're not, what predictions and expectations are shaping their experience. It changes how you hold your own beliefs. Instead of treating your perceptions as unquestionable truth, you can recognize them as filtered constructions, useful but incomplete, shaped by factors you're not fully aware of. It changes how you approach disagreements. Instead of fighting about who's right about objective reality, you can explore how you're filtering differently, what each of you is seeing, what might be true in both experiences even though they seem contradictory. It changes how you think about memory and history. Instead of treating the past as fixed and knowable, you can recognize that your access to it is always filtered through reconstruction, always shaped by your current perspective. It changes how you experience the present moment. Instead of taking your experience for granted, you can appreciate it as a construction, a simulation, a remarkable achievement of your brain assembling coherence from chaos. ** living with the knowledge. So, what do you do with this information? How do you live once you understand that your entire experience of reality is filtered, constructed, predicted? You could become paralyzed by uncertainty, questioning everything you perceive. But that's not useful. Your brain's filters exist for good reasons. They allow you to function. They help you navigate complexity. They keep you focused on what matters for your survival and goals. Doubting every perception, second-guessing every memory, questioning every belief to the point of paralysis, that's not wisdom. That's a different kind of dysfunction. Or you could use this knowledge to become more effective, more aware, more intentional about what you pay attention to and how you interpret your experiences. You can practice noticing your own filters. When you're completely sure about something, pause and ask, what am I filtering out? What might I be missing? What predictions am I making that could be wrong? Not to undermine yourself, but to maintain appropriate humility, to stay curious, to remain open to information that contradicts your expectations. You can be more generous in disagreements, recognizing that the other person might have genuinely experienced something different, perceived something different, remembered something different, not because they're lying, but because their brain filtered and constructed differently. This doesn't mean all perspectives are equally valid or that there's no truth. It means that when you encounter disagreement, it's worth considering whether you're disagreeing about filtering rather than about underlying reality. You can be more intentional about where you direct your limited attention, understanding that what you choose to focus on becomes your reality in a very literal sense. Your attention shapes what information makes it through the filters. You can't attend to everything, but you can choose what you attend to. If you constantly focus on threats, on problems, on what's wrong, your attention will filter reality to show you more threats, more problems, more wrongness. Not because that's all there is, but because that's what you're training your filters to notice. If you practice noticing beauty, or gratitude, or opportunity, your filters will adjust to show you more of those things. Again, not because you're denying reality, but because you're changing what aspects of reality make it through your filters. You can practice broadening your attention sometimes, noticing details you normally filter out, looking for things you expect not to be there, questioning your own predictions about what you're about to see or hear. Try this right now. Look around your environment and deliberately notice something you've never consciously registered before. A texture, a color variation, a shadow pattern, a small object. It was always there. Your eyes have captured it countless times, but it never made it through your filters until you deliberately looked for it. This practice expands your awareness of how much you're normally missing. It reveals the active construction happening in your perception. You can be more humble about your memories, recognizing that they're reconstructions, not recordings, and that the confidence you feel in them doesn't correlate with their accuracy. When you find yourself in conflict with someone about what happened, instead of insisting you're right, you can acknowledge that you both might be accurately reporting your reconstructed memories, which genuinely differ because the reconstruction process was different. And you can appreciate the remarkable achievement of your brain, the way it takes overwhelming chaos and constructs coherent experience, the way it predicts the future and shows it to you as the present, the way it hides its own processes so completely that you experience the result as unfiltered reality. Your brain is doing something extraordinary every moment. It's creating your entire conscious experience, your entire sense of reality, from incomplete and ambiguous information. It's doing it so well that you never question it, never doubt that you're seeing what's really there. That's remarkable. Even as you become aware of the filtering, even as you recognize the constructed nature of your experience, you can appreciate the elegance and effectiveness of the system. Hash the question you can't, unsee. I told you at the beginning that once you notice these filters, you can't unsee them. And it's true. You'll start catching your brain in the act. You'll notice when familiar things suddenly look different. You'll wonder what you're missing right now. You'll question whether what you're seeing is really there or just what you expect to be there. This awareness lives in the back of your mind now, a quiet voice asking, "What else is my brain hiding from me?" And that's not a comfortable question. It suggests that your confident sense of knowing what's real might be misplaced. It implies that you're walking around in a simulation, experiencing a constructed reality that only approximates the actual world. It means you can never fully trust your own perceptions, your own memories, your own certainty about what happened or what's happening now. But it's also a liberating question. Because if your experience is constructed, if your filters can change, if your attention shapes your reality, then you have more power than you thought. You're not just a passive receiver of objective reality. You're an active participant in constructing your own experience. You can't choose what happens. You can't control objective reality. But you can influence how you filter it, what you pay attention to, what predictions you make, what meanings you assign. You can choose to look for things you normally miss. You can choose to question your own certainties. You can choose to consider alternative interpretations. You can choose to notice beauty or gratitude or opportunity instead of just threats and problems. The filters will continue operating. Your brain will keep compressing, selecting, predicting. You can't change that fundamental architecture, but you can become more aware of it, more intentional about it, more curious about what you're missing and what you're assuming. And maybe that's enough. Not to see everything, which is impossible, but to see that you're not seeing everything, which is the beginning of wisdom. To recognize that your reality is constructed, that other people are constructing different realities from the same information, that your memories are reconstructions, that your certainties are based on predictions, that your attention is creating your experience as much as revealing it. This knowledge doesn't make you less functional. In many ways, it makes you more functional, more flexible, more able to adapt to new information, more capable of understanding and communicating with others who filter differently. It makes you more humble without making you uncertain to the point of paralysis, more curious without being paralyzed by doubt, more aware without being overwhelmed. You still need to make decisions based on your perceptions, trust your memories enough to function, maintain enough certainty to act. But you can do all of that while recognizing that your perceptions are filtered, your memories are reconstructed, your certainties are provisional. You can hold your beliefs lightly while still holding them. You can trust your experience while recognizing its limitations. You can function effectively while maintaining awareness that your reality is constructed. Final thoughts. Reality isn't what you see. It never was. It's what your brain allows you to see, filtered through layers of compression and selection and prediction, shaped by your expectations and goals and past experiences, colored by your emotions, structured by your language and culture, constructed moment by moment from incomplete information. This is disturbing. It undermines the confident certainty most people have about their own perceptions and memories. It suggests that the stable, coherent reality you experience is more fragile, more constructed, more negotiable than you want to believe. But it's also true. This is how perception works. This is how your brain works. And understanding it doesn't break your connection to reality. It just makes you more accurate about what that connection actually is. You live in a filtered world, experiencing a predicted simulation, missing most of what's there, filling in gaps with expectations, remembering reconstructions rather than recordings. And so does everyone else, each with their own filters, their own simulations, their own versions of reality constructed from the same underlying information. This should make you more humble about what you know, more curious about what you're missing, more generous when others experience things differently, more intentional about where you direct your limited attention. The filters slipped tonight just a little. You noticed them. Became aware of the constant editing and construction happening behind the scenes of your awareness. And now, you can't completely unknow it. The question, what else is my brain hiding, will keep returning, and it should, because the answer is almost everything. But you're paying attention now. You're looking at the filters themselves instead of just through them. And that's the first step toward understanding not just what you see, but how you see, and why what you see isn't everything that's there. The world hasn't changed. Your awareness of how you experience the world has changed, and that changes everything. Your nose is still invisible unless you think about it. Your blind spots are still there. The compression is still happening. The predictions are still being generated. The attention is still selecting a tiny fraction of available information. The emotional coloring is still operating. The cultural categories are still structuring what seems meaningful. All of it continues. The machinery keeps running. The simulation keeps updating. The filters keep filtering. But now you know. You know that the seamless, coherent, stable reality you experience is an achievement, not a given. You know that your brain is working constantly to create this experience, to maintain this illusion of direct access to an objective world. And in that knowledge, there's both humility and power. Humility because you recognize how limited your perception actually is, how much you're missing, how constructed your experience is. Power because you recognize that the construction can change, that you have some influence over your filters, that your reality is more flexible than it seems. Welcome to filtered reality. You've been living here your entire life. You just never noticed until now. And now that you've noticed, now that you've seen behind the curtain, caught a glimpse of the machinery, become aware of the construction, everything is different. Not because the world changed, but because you understand your relationship to the world differently. You understand that you're not seeing reality. You're seeing what your brain allows you to see. And that's all you've ever seen. And that's all you'll ever see. But at least now you know.